Rose stood at the window of her living pod, watching the giant figures of her people walk past on their way to the Science Academy. At 30 stories high, her window gave her the perfect view of their faces, faces that never looked down to notice her. She pressed her small hand against the transparent barrier, feeling more alone than ever. On Lumina, being 5 feet and 4 inches tall wasn't just unusual, it was unheard of. The average Luminan towered at 30 feet, their bodies perfectly adapted to the planet's lower gravity and dense atmosphere. But Rose had been born different, a genetic anomaly that the Council couldn't explain. The morning sun cast long shadows through the crystal spires of the city, creating rainbow patterns on her floor. Rose moved to her workstation, activating the floating screens with a wave of her hand. Her latest research on xenobiology filled the air around her, diagrams of various alien species spinning slowly as she reviewed her notes. Attention! Council summons for Citizen Rose. The automated voice echoed through her pod. Immediate attendance required. Rose's heart sank. Council summons never brought good news, especially not for someone like her. She grabbed her data pad and headed to her personal transport pod. A necessity since she couldn't use the regular public transportation designed for normal-sized Luminans. The council chamber doors towered above her like the entrance to a mountain. They slid open with a soft hum, revealing the semicircle of 12 council members seated in their massive chairs. Rose walked to the center of the room, feeling like a child's toy among giants. "Citizen Rose," the head councilor's voice boomed from above, "your continued presence on Lumina has become a matter of serious concern." Rose stood straighter, though it made little difference. "My research in xenobiology has been productive. I've made several breakthroughs in understanding." "Your academic achievements are not in question," another counselor interrupted. "It is your genetic makeup that concerns us." The head counselor nodded gravely. "Recent studies suggest your condition might not be as random as initially thought. There is a risk it could spread to future generations through yet unknown means." Rose wanted to argue against this ridiculous claim. She was a scientist. She knew there was no scientific basis for their fears, but she also knew that fear rarely listened to reason. "The council has reached a decision," the head counselor continued. "You will be exiled from Lumina. However, given your contributions to our scientific community, we grant you the right to choose your destination from our database of habitable worlds." Rose's mind raced. Exile had always been a possibility. She prepared for it. She pulled out her data pad and projected a hologram of a small blue-green planet. "Earth," she said firmly. "I choose Earth." Murmurs filled the chamber. Earth was a primitive world, still in its early stages of civilization. The Luminans had observed it but never interfered, considering it too underdeveloped for contact. "You understand this is a one-way journey?" the head counselor asked. "Earth's technology level cannot support space travel. You will never return to Lumina." "I understand," Rose replied, her voice steady despite her racing heart. "Their average height matches mine. Their gravity and atmosphere are suitable for my physiology. It's the logical choice." The council deliberated briefly before approving her choice. They gave her 3 days to prepare for departure. As Rose left the chamber, her mind was already working on plans. She would be allowed to take her research in basic technology. Nothing that could drastically alter Earth's development, but enough to survive. Back in her pod, Rose began packing her life into storage units. She felt a strange mix of fear and excitement. On Lumina, she was a genetic defect, an outcast. But on Earth, she would be normal-sized. Perhaps there, among beings her own size, she could finally find acceptance. As she watched the sunset paint the crystal spires in shades of purple and gold, Rose realized this would be one of her last views of her home world. But sometimes, she thought, the end of one story was just the beginning of a better one. The ship's warning systems blared to life as Rose entered Earth's atmosphere. Red lights flashed across the control panel, and the small vessel shuddered violently. Something was wrong. Very wrong. "Warning. Atmospheric entry calculations error. Gravitational compensation failing. The ship's computer announced in its calm voice, "Impact imminent." Rose's fingers flew across the holographic controls. She had studied Earth extensively before her journey, but theoretical knowledge wasn't helping much now. The ship's systems weren't designed for pilots her size, and the emergency protocols were failing one by one. Through the viewport, she could see the ground rushing up to meet her. The landscape below was a mix of rivers, grasslands, and early human settlements. The region her research had identified as Mesopotamia, the cradle of human civilization. Rerouting power to impact shields, she commanded, her voice steady despite her racing heart. The ship's AI complied, but the power readings were fluctuating wildly. Engage emergency landing protocols. The ship screamed through the air, its outer hull glowing red-hot. Rose could see pieces of the external plating breaking away. She had one chance to survive this, and it would take perfect timing. "Computer, activate stasis field on my mark," she ordered, watching the altitude numbers drop rapidly. 3, 2, 1, now. A shimming bubble of energy enveloped her just as the ship slammed into the earth. The impact was tremendous, carving a deep trench through the soil and throwing up a massive cloud of dust and debris. The vessel's reinforced hull crumpled and twisted, but the cockpit's integrity held. When the dust settled, Rose found herself in a crater nearly half a mile long. The stasis field flickered and died, leaving her shaken but alive. Emergency lights cast an eerie blue glow through the smoke-filled cockpit. "Status report," she coughed. "Hull integrity at 42%. Main power at 17%. Self-repair systems engaging," the computer responded. "Estimated time for minimum flight capability, 847 local days." Rose checked her survival gear as the ship's remaining systems stabilized. Her medical kit was intact, along with her basic research tools and emergency supplies. The ship's self-repair system was working, but it would take years before she could even think about leaving, if she wanted to leave at all. She activated the external cameras. The crash had occurred just before dawn, and the first rays of Earth's sun were painting the sky in beautiful shades of pink and orange. In the distance, she could see movement, humans, probably drawn by the spectacular light show of her crash landing. "Computer, analyze atmospheric composition," she ordered while gathering her essential gear. The readings confirmed what she already knew. The air was breathable for her. At least that part of her research had been correct. Rose took a deep breath and opened the emergency hatch. As she stepped out onto the scorched earth, she got her first real look at her new home. The air was warm and heavy with the scent of fertile soil and river water. In the distance, she could see the primitive but impressive walls of the city. The sound of voices drew closer. Rose could see a group of humans approaching cautiously, their bronze weapons glinting in the early morning light. They were exactly her size, just as her research had indicated. Their faces showed a mix of fear and awe as they took in the glowing wreckage of her ship. She straightened her back and turned to face them. This wasn't how she had planned to make first contact, but she would have to adapt. Her hand clutched her medical kit, the most basic but impressive piece of technology she had brought. If she played this right, she could find a place among these people while her ship repaired itself. The humans were getting closer now, and Rose could hear them speaking in their ancient language. She activated her universal translator implant and prepared to meet her first Earth humans. Whatever happened next would shape not only her fate, but potentially the course of human history itself. The first month on Earth changed everything. Rose sat in her new chamber within the great temple of Uruk, watching the sunset through the elaborately carved window. The humans had given her this space after she healed their king's youngest son from a deadly fever. Her medical kit had done most of the work, but to them, it seemed like pure magic. The small device had analyzed the boy's illness and produced the necessary treatment in minutes. After that, the whispers started, whispers that she had come from the heavens, that she was divine. "Great Inanna," a soft voice called from the doorway. It was Maya, a young priestess assigned to attend to Rose's needs. The humans had given her the name Inanna, their word for the divine lady of the heavens. The people bring more offerings. Rose turned to see a line of humans entering the outer chamber, carrying baskets of food, cloth, and precious metals. She had tried to refuse such gifts at first, but she quickly learned that doing so only confused and hurt them. "Thank you, Maya," Rose said, her translator implant perfectly converting her words into their language. She had learned early on that trying to explain she was just an alien from another world would do more harm than good. These people needed to understand things in terms they could grasp. Later that evening, as she worked with her salvaged equipment, Rose heard commotion from outside. A group of farmers had arrived, desperate for help. Their crops were failing, and they feared starvation in the coming winter. Rose followed them to their fields the next 150 years had passed since Rose's crash landing. She stood in her private garden atop the Great Ziggurat, looking out over a city that had grown beyond recognition. The small settlement of Uruk had become the center of civilization in this part of the world, its influence spreading far and wide. Rose hadn't aged a day. The enhanced genetics of her people gave her a lifespan far beyond that of humans. She had watched 5 generations of Maya's family serve as her high priestesses. The current Maya was the great-great-granddaughter of the first, named in honor of the tradition. "My Lady Inanna," the young Maya called, approaching with a scroll. "The astronomers have completed the star charts you requested." Rose took the carefully drawn map of the night sky. She had been teaching them astronomy, helping them track the movements of planets and stars. It gave her a strange feeling. She had come from those stars, and now she was teaching others to understand them. "Very good," Rose said, noting their improving accuracy. "But remind them to pay special attention to the movement of the Red Wanderer." She couldn't tell them it was a planet called Mars, but she could guide their observations. Later that day, she visited the school she had helped establish. Children from noble families learned reading, writing, and mathematics here. Rose had carefully introduced new concepts over the decades, making sure each generation built upon the knowledge of the last. A young boy was struggling with a mathematical problem written on a clay tablet. Rose sat beside him, her heart aching a little. He reminded her of Little Reed, a child she had taught 70 years ago. Little Reed had grown up, become a great scholar, aged, and died, all while Rose remained unchanged. "Look at it this way," she said, drawing a simple diagram in the clay. The boy's eyes lit up with understanding. These moments made her work worthwhile, even as they reminded her of her eternal separation from the people she helped. That evening, Rose returned to her ship's crash site, now hidden within a sacred grove where only she could enter. The vessel had repaired itself decades ago, but she had chosen to stay. She used it now as her private sanctuary and laboratory. "Computer, display historical records," she commanded. Images filled the air around her, documents, drawings, and notes spanning 150 years. She had recorded everything. The development of their writing system, the growth of their cities, the evolution of their technology. A particular image caught her eye, a family portrait from 80 years ago. The ruling family had commissioned artists to paint her with them. In the painting, she stood beside the king, queen, and their children. Those children had grown old and died. Their children, too, had lived full lives and passed on. But there she was, unchanged, watching generation after generation slip away. Rose touched the ancient medical kit that had first established her divine status. It still worked perfectly, unlike her heart, which grew heavier with each passing decade. The humans worshipped her, loved her, trusted her, but they could never truly know her. "My lady," Maya's voice called from outside the grove. "The temple needs your guidance for the harvest festival." Rose quickly shut down the ship's systems. "I'm coming," she called back, composing herself. As she walked back to the temple with Maya, Rose noticed new construction at the city's edge. They were expanding again, using the improved building techniques she had subtly introduced. The sight filled her with pride and sadness. Pride in their achievements, sadness in knowing she would outlive these buildings too. Sometimes, she said softly, more to herself than to Maya, immortality feels less like a blessing and more like a test of strength. Maya looked at her questioningly, but Rose just smiled. She had taught them so much, but some burdens of divinity, like the weight of endless years, she would have to bear alone. Rose's hands trembled as she looked at the ship's sensor readings. Her worst fear had come true. 3 Luminan vessels were approaching Earth, their massive shapes clearly visible on her scanner's display. "Computer, analyze their trajectory and intent," she commanded, her voice tight with worry. The answer came back exactly as she had feared. They were on an intercept course with Earth, and their weapon systems were active. She rushed to her private chamber in the temple, mind racing. After nearly 2 centuries, her people had finally tracked her down. But why now? The answer hit her as she looked out over the flourishing civilization below. They had been watching Earth's progress. To the Luminan Council, Earth's rapid advancement under her guidance would look like proof of their fears. They would think she had created a colony of defectives like herself. The thought of her own people destroying everything these humans had built made her sick to her stomach. "My lady Inanna." Maya burst into the room, out of breath. The astronomers report strange lights in the sky, moving against the stars themselves. Rose looked up at the night sky through her window. The Luminan ships were now visible to the naked eye, 3 bright points of light moving in formation. Soon, everyone would see them. She had a choice to make. She could try to contact the ships and offer herself in exchange for Earth's safety, but she knew her people too well. They would see Earth's development as a threat that needed to be eliminated, or she could finally tell the humans the truth and help them prepare for what was coming. "Maya," Rose said, turning to her trusted priestess, "gather the king, his generals, and all the high priests. There is something I must tell you all. The true story of who I am and where I come from." 2 hours later, Rose stood before the assembled leaders in the temple's great hall. She had activated her ship's holographic projector, letting them see images of her home world and her people. "I am not a goddess," she said, her voice steady despite her fear. "I come from a world among the stars, where my people grow as tall as mountains. They sent me away because I was born small, like you. Now they come not as gods, but as conquerors who fear what is different." The silence in the hall was deafening. Rose waited, her heart pounding, for their reaction. Would they turn on her? Attack her for lying to them? Instead, the old king stood up. "You have guided us, protected us, and taught us for generations," he said firmly. "Whether you came from the stars or were born of them matters not. You are our Inanna, and we will stand with you." Murmurs of agreement filled the hall. Maya stepped forward, her eyes shining with tears, but her voice strong. "You have been our guardian for 2 centuries. Now it is our turn to fight for you." Rose felt tears in her own eyes as she activated the second part of her presentation. Technical drawings and designs she had prepared for just such a moment. "Then we must prepare quickly. My people are strong, but they have weaknesses. With your bronze working skills and my knowledge, we can create weapons they won't expect." The generals leaned forward, studying the designs with intense interest. Rose explained how they could combine Earth's Bronze Age technology with salvaged parts from her crash to create hybrid weapons capable of penetrating Luminan ship armor. As the meeting continued into the night, Rose felt a strange mix of emotions. She had spent centuries helping these humans advance while trying not to influence them too much. Now she would have to give them weapons they shouldn't have for centuries to come. But the alternative was watching them be destroyed. The Luminan ships would arrive in 7 days. It would have to be enough time. The 7 days passed like a whirlwind. Rose stood on top of the Great Ziggurat, watching hundreds of humans prepare for battle below. The city had transformed into a fortress. Bronze weapons enhanced with parts from her ship gleamed in the morning sun. "The last group from Ur has arrived," Maya reported, pointing to a dust cloud on the horizon. "And the warriors from Kish brought their chariots, just as you requested." Rose nodded, checking the small device on her wrist. The Luminant ships would enter Earth's atmosphere within hours. She had spent every waking moment of the past week preparing the humans for this fight. In the courtyard below, soldiers practiced with their new weapons. Bronze spears now carried power cores from her ship's spare parts, capable of releasing bursts of energy that could pierce Luminant armor. The chariots had been fitted with shield generators that would protect them from energy weapons. "My lady," a young soldier called up to her. "The Sky Watchers report the lights are growing larger." Rose raised her own viewing device. The 3 Luminant ships were indeed descending, their massive forms breaking through the clouds. Each one was the size of a small city. Her people had never believed in subtlety. "Sound the alert," she ordered. "Everyone to their positions." Horns echoed across the city as people rushed to their assigned places. Rose had organized them well. The old, young, and sick were hidden in underground chambers. The warriors stood ready at strategic points throughout the city. The ground shook as the first Luminant ship landed outside the city walls. A massive door opened in its side, and giant figures began to emerge. Rose could hear gasps of fear from the humans as they saw their enemies for the first time. Beings 9 times their height, dressed in gleaming armor. "People of Earth," a booming voice echoed from the ship's speakers in the humans' language. "Your civilization has been corrupted by a genetic defective. Surrender her, and we may spare your lives." Rose stepped forward to the edge of the ziggurat, her voice amplified by her own technology. "I am here, Council of Lumina. But these people are not corrupted. They are strong, intelligent, and worthy of respect." The lead Luminant raised a weapon the size of a house. "You have polluted their development. They must be cleansed. Now," Rose shouted. The battle erupted in an instant. Chariots raced out from hidden positions, their shield generators deflecting the Luminant energy blasts. Bronze spears charged with power cores struck the giants' armor, causing them to stumble in surprise. The Luminants had expected primitive humans with bronze weapons. Instead, they faced an army using hybrid technology they had never seen before. Their size, usually an advantage, made them easy targets for the swift, smaller humans. "Impossible," the Luminant commander shouted as another group of giants fell to the coordinated human attack. "They are nothing but primitives." Rose watched as her plan unfolded. The humans worked in perfect teams, groups of chariots distracting the giants while spear throwers struck at weak points in their armor. She had taught them well. "Size does not determine worth," Rose called out to her former people. "These humans have shown more wisdom, courage, and adaptability than the Council ever did." The battle raged for hours. The Luminants, despite their advanced technology, found themselves overwhelmed by the sheer number and determination of the humans. Their weapons, designed to fight enemies their own size, proved less effective against smaller, faster targets. As the sun began to set, Rose watched the last Luminant ship lift off from Earth, carrying its defeated forces. The humans had won, but at a cost. Many brave warriors had fallen in the battle, yet they had proved something extraordinary, that the size of one's heart mattered more than the size of one's body. Maya joined her on the ziggurat's top, both of them watching the retreating ships become stars again in the darkening sky. "What happens now?" she asked softly. Rose looked at the celebration beginning in the city below. "Now," she said, "we rebuild, and we prepare for the day when humanity will reach the stars on their own terms." 20 years had passed since the Great Battle. Rose walked through the streets of Uruk, now bigger and more advanced than ever before. The victory over the Luminants had changed everything. Knowledge that they weren't alone in the universe had unified Earth's civilizations in ways she hadn't expected. Children played in the streets with toy spaceships made of bronze and clay, imitating the battle their parents had fought. In the distance, she could see the new observatory being built, its design combining ancient architecture with elements of her own technology. "Teacher," called a voice. Rose turned to see one of her students from the Science Academy. she had established after the battle. Yum Tom ran up to her, carrying a bronze telescope of his own design. "We've finished the star mapping project you assigned." Rose smiled, remembering how she had slowly introduced the concept of telescopes after the battle. There was no point hiding such technology anymore. The humans had earned the right to look at the stars and dream. "Let me see," she said, taking the star chart. The accuracy impressed her. These humans, given just a little guidance, were advancing faster than she had ever imagined. In her private chamber later that day, Rose recorded her daily log. Earth date 2223 BCE. The integration of hybrid technology continues smoothly. The humans have taken what they learned from the battle and applied it in peaceful ways. They build telescopes instead of weapons, healing devices instead of shields. She paused, looking at the old medical kit that had first established her as a goddess. It seemed so long ago now. Most importantly, they've maintained their balance. They advance, but they haven't lost their art, their music, their culture. They build observatories next to temples, seeing no conflict between science and spirit. A knock at her door interrupted her recording. Maya entered, not the original Maya, of course, but her great-great-great-granddaughter. The family tradition of service had continued, though now they served not a goddess but a teacher and friend. "The Council of Cities wishes to speak with you," Maya said. After the battle, the major cities had formed a council to guide humanity's development. Rose served as an advisor, but she had refused to lead directly. These were human achievements. They needed to guide their own destiny. In the council chamber, leaders from Ur, Kish, Lagash, and other cities gathered around a large table. They no longer wore just traditional robes. Some had added elements of Luminan design, creating a unique style that represented their new understanding of the universe. "Teacher," the head of the council greeted her. "We've received reports from our southern observers. They'd spotted something in the southern sky, a light that moves like the Luminan ships did." Rose checked her sensors. "It's a comet," she explained, "a natural phenomenon. But I'm proud you're watching the skies so carefully." Looking at their relieved faces, Rose felt a warmth in her heart. These humans had faced giants from the stars and won. Now they watched the skies not with fear, but with curiosity and wonder. Later that night, Rose visited her ship in the sacred grove. The vessel had been fully repaired for years, but she had never considered leaving. This was her home now. She had found something here that she never had on Lumina: acceptance, purpose, and love. From the grove, she could see students at the observatory, their telescopes pointed at the stars. In workshops across the city, artisans crafted new devices that combined Earth's resources with principles she had taught them. In homes and temples, people sang songs not of gods and monsters, but of brave humans who stood against giants. "Computer," she said softly, "begin final log entry. I once thought being exiled to Earth was a punishment. Instead, it was the beginning of the greatest adventure in two worlds' histories. These humans will reach the stars one day, not as conquerors or followers, but as explorers and equals. And I will be here to see it, not as their goddess, but as their friend and teacher." Above her, the stars twinkled with possibility, promising not an end, but a beginning. Humanity's journey to the stars had begun, and Rose would be there every step of the way.